Well, Dean, thank you for taking the time to be on the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. I'm really excited for this conversation. I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm. I think what you guys are doing out there at Farm Grade is super cool. And I'm looking forward to getting your take on what intentional leadership looks like to you. So let's start with there. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
Well, I'm excited to be here too. Excited to have this conversation and appreciate the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, what it means to be intentional is to have a goal in mind and to drive towards that goal, to be goal oriented.
I like it. I like it. And it really can be just that simple, you know?
Yeah,
And
and I think our goals change. I think that they're fluid,
mhm.
right? I can set a goal and a year later I can find that, hey, I need to tweak that or bend it around a little bit. But there's nothing wrong with that either. You tweak it, strive towards it, and as circumstances, allow or require, you make corrections, but you still need to have a goal in mind, to be intentional.
Here's something I'm out here to achieve, something that I want to go get.
That's right.
Do you find yourself needing like lots of little goals to stack up in order to create a big goal? Do you break things down that way, or is it good enough for you? And this is how I am. Here's the big goal. I'm not very good at breaking things down into small bite-sized steps. Some people are, and they like that. I'm just curious on your take.
Yeah, so I think that for me, there are steps to achieve that goal. So you can say there's a set of smaller goals inside of that big goal, right? That you're working towards. And once again, back to the fluidness of it, I think that those goals change periodically. I think that there are things that require that you tweak those goals so that they don't knock you off the path towards the big goal, right? So I for me, it's a series of smaller goals within, a design to get to the end goal.
Good stuff. Well, you know, we talked with a fair number of leaders on this podcast already. As we look around the broad scope of the industry, as we have been in the interviews, a lot of people, a lot of companies have been struggling with talent retention in agribusiness. I'm just curious if we're going to talk about goals. I'm hoping one of them is to keep people around and build thriving teams. To each their own, but what are some things you guys are doing over there to be intentional about retaining talent, attracting talent, and doing good things that way?
So I like this question, and I think it ties right back to goals, right? So for me, running a business, I've got a goal of sales and gross margin, and I have a goal of what I want to get to in hiring salesmen, which is primarily that's been my task and my charge, and then maintaining that sales team. Um, it's important to find out what their goals are because their goals don't necessarily align with my goals. My goal might be to make them the best salesman in the world and have them hit, a new record high in sales. And that may not be their goal. Their goal might be to have a smaller sales base and just take really good care of them and not dedicate all that time to being the top salesman. They may not be driven the same way. And so I think that in that hiring of somebody, you have to find out what their goals are. And if their goals can align or help you with your goals in running a business, then I think that that's a good match. And you just have to remember, what drives them. Some of them need attention. Some of them need recognition as they strive to reach those goals. Some of them don't. And so part of that retention process is remembering what their goals are. If their goals are to be able to take their kids to work with them once in a while, remember that, allow that, help that to happen because that's important to them. If their goal is to hit, to be the top salesman in their area, help them hit that goal. If it just depends on what those goals are, and then to try to align your goals, and they may not align the way that you want them to align. And that's part of the key to retention, in my opinion. It's not all about what you want. It's about what they want as well.
Mm. And so what you're speaking to right there is what I'm defining as true intention. right? Really, we're using different language, right? You're putting in goals and I'm putting in intention, but what we're talking about is really understanding the nuance of what makes that person tick.
Yep.
And here's where I think things go off the rails. And so I'm interested in your take on this. A lot of times we have initiatives that are driven very much from the top down, and it's just very clear. There's a goal to meet. And within our culture, we don't really care whether that matches up with what you want as that salesperson. How do you solve for that? And maybe an organization of your size, that's a little bit more possible. I'm thinking about people in larger organizations where it's very top down driven, but I can see where that becomes a real challenge for people sometimes, right? To be able to be as intentional as you're talking, understanding what's important to that person while still meeting organizational objectives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that as you peel back those layers, I'm going to divert just a little bit to help answer that. When I used to do interviews, I used to drive into those interviews and, you were looking for an enthusiastic, energetic type person. And over time, my interviews, trying to hire that top talent has evolved, right? And part of that has changed to uncovering those layers. I want to find out what makes that person tick. I want to find out what they want in life, because if what they want in life is different, or they're not going to get there doing this job, then it's not a good fit, right? And I involved them in that process. In a true interview now, I think that those people that are being interviewed should ask as many questions of the employer as what the employer should be asking of them. They should be trying to peel back those layers and find out if this job can help them reach their goals. And so I think that all ties back to the end, to the end goal, right? So I think it's peeling back those layers and finding out what makes a person tick, and then working together to get there.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. And one of the frustrations that I have about the work world today and the perception of people in leadership roles is it almost feels in some ways, and I guess this is the cost of being a leader, but it almost feels in some ways that there's an unfair expectation that this leader is going to be able to figure out everything that you need in order to be able to make yourself successful. And so you brought up a really important point. Shouldn't the prospective employee in an interview situation be doing a good job of also asking questions and vetting whether or not this is going to be a good employer? And that's where intention is required on that side of the equation as well, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of people lack clarity about what they truly want and about what's truly important to them. And then maybe they don't know to ask for it. Maybe they don't know to bring it up. And then 6 months down the road or 16 months down the road, all of a sudden there's dissatisfaction and disengagement, right? Because you didn't know what you wanted.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting dance, right? People's stuff is messy.
In my opinion, too, that is our role as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our role as a good leader, right? Back to those goals change, and then back to helping those employees figure that out. I mean, as a leader, we should be working that angle or that direction to know what that employee wants and what drives them and what makes them tick. And then we should be helping enable them to reach their goals, right? That's our job, to peel back the layers, because sometimes they can't see it. So a good leader should be leading that way. Help find out what's going to get them there to their goal. And then they'll be a happy employee. And then that reverts back to your question. How do we retain them? If they're happy, if they're reaching their goals and feel powerful in that, and we help them do that, that's a good fit.
Mm-hmm. That's a great fit. And I love it. And I love that you say it with so much passion. There's so much value and so much just important intention that goes into being an intentional leader. Now I'm using the word twice there to describe this person, but the more I study, and I've now been studying the word intention well before we started to create this podcast, a good 9 months before we started recording episodes. I've been studying intention. I've been studying intentional leadership. I've been studying what's required in my life to be more intentional. And as the more I study it, the more life shows me all the ways that I'm not intentional. Because I'm starting to measure myself against a higher standard, because what I've realized, Dean, is how much work is required, how much presence is required to be intentional.
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about culture for a minute. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of companies talk about it. I think, in my opinion, very few do a great job of executing against intentional culture. Just curious, what do you think from your perspective is important about building an intentional workplace culture?
I think that that's a good question too. Kind of makes you think for a minute. I think that one of the problems with culture is that we tend to lose sight of the end goal with some of those small goals. And I think that back to a sales driven organization and back to my roles in helping drive sales, if you have a culture at a company that we're going to take care of our customers and we're going to thrive together, we're going to, as they succeed, we succeed, right? But you have a sales goal at the end of the year and you're driving towards that sales goal at all cost, sometimes you can lose sight of the cultural goal or the big goal and the end game. And I think that that's part of the problem that we have with culture today. I think we lose sight of the culture that we want to maintain or that we want to drive. Or I also think cultures change and tend to shift a little bit. You get new leaders into an organization and younger people coming up, and their culture is different than an older culture. And so back to your goals maybe shifting a little bit, but at the same time, I think that has to be evaluated before you choose to shift. You have to look at it and say, do we want our culture to shift, right? Am I too focused on a sales number today versus an end game in play, right? And so it's kind of like getting to the Super Bowl, right? If the goal is to get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, right? You can't get caught up when you lose one game in season. You learn from it, you strive forward, and you make some adjustments, and then you head for the Super Bowl. You keep going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's so important. You have to keep your eye on the prize. And if that's what's important to the leaders in that culture, I think, right, that's what becomes important in the culture. And so some teams develop a culture of being Super Bowl bound or national championship bound every year. As we record this, we're in the midst of the football season, right? It's October, middle of October. And, I grew up in Minnesota kid, grew up in Minnesota. And I'm not here to dig on Minnesota sports team, but I've had my heart broken enough times to just have a little bit of that hopelessness. And we have a culture in Minnesota. It's very interesting where I grew up. And I noticed this once I left Minnesota and went other places, where at least when I grew up in Minnesota, we would say things like, man, it sure would be nice. It sure would be nice if we could get there and get to the playoffs this year. Sure would be nice, right? If the Gophers could win a few more football games. And you felt really lucky when they did, right? And then I moved to Nebraska, which at that point hadn't had a good team in a while, but they had the dominant culture in the mid 90s. So there's a significant expectation in football culture between Minnesota to Nebraska about winning. And they're going to everything they can until they get back to where they were in the mid 90s, and I love both those teams. And so I'm not here to play one over the other, but that's the culture of a state, even around what that means, is so important to how to, the PJ Fleck has had a pretty good run at University of Minnesota so far. We've had some 9-4 seasons. We had maybe a 10-win season under him, get a lot of notoriety this year. That I think they're going to be lucky to break about 500. Okay. Got a new quarterback, new offensive line, new running back. It takes time to get that team ticking together again, working within his culture there. Right. And This is what they're gonna do, and I promise you they will try to get him fired. Just wait. This is what we do because we're not getting there fast enough. But when you don't have that intentional culture built in, you make silly decisions like that without staying the course.
Yeah. And I think once again, that plays back to us as leaders, right? If you've changed a couple pieces in that coaching organization to where you've lost that, then as a leader, you have to sort that out and fix it so you can head back into that winning culture. And if it's just you've got a rough quarterback or you've got a young quarterback and he's developing, stay the course. Make sure you've got everything that you need and continue to recruit and back to the leadership part of that, right? I mean, that's our job to tweak and manage that culture with an end goal in mind of what we want that to look like.
Yes, absolutely. All right, man. Let's talk a little bit more about you. I'm interested in what you've gone through, hurdles you've had to overcome, wins that you've had. What's the biggest hurdle that you've had to overcome, Dean, as a leader?
Yeah. So this is where you'll start to get to know me a little bit more, right? Because I guess when I looked at that question, I thought, I was weighing all my work situations and different challenges. And I guess the biggest thing for me has been, we had cancer in our family. My wife got cancer when she was 37, and there was no history of it in our family. We had 4 young kids at the time, and as the leader of our family, I mean, that was the biggest challenge. As I look back across my career and everything that I've done, that was the biggest challenge that we've had to face and manage through, I guess. And that goes back to some of your goals change or get tweaked or get set to the side for a minute while you work on something else, that kind of trumps some of that. So that was kind of a life altering event that we didn't see coming, and happy to report that my wife's still around, and we've raised our 4 kids, and they're all 4 married, and we have grandkids now. And I'm really thankful that she's here with me because I don't think it would have turned out near as good without her. So
Absolutely.
very thankful for that.
Yes. Well, I'm thankful for that for you as well. And it is, I think it says in the book that it is not good for man to be alone. And so I'm sure that has helped to keep things moving forward. You use some interesting language in there, though, which I want to touch back on, which is as the leader of my house. Right. And I think in certain places we still do a good job of thinking about ourselves that way. I know as a young husband, I did a poor job of that, thinking of myself as the leader of our house. I think in society as a whole, we've emasculated young men and made it almost toxic to be to consider ourselves the leader of our house. And that doesn't mean that there aren't shared responsibilities, but ultimately somebody's the leader of the house. So as you went through that challenging time with your family, how did that stretch you to be the leader of your house?
So let's go back and dive in just a tiny bit deeper there. So when I say leader, I think that we have responsibilities, but at the end of the day, my wife is the one that was raising our kids and doing such a good job because we're away working and busy and traveling for work. And at the end of the day, we lead together, right? That's part of why I said, man, I needed her there or they wouldn't have turned out the way they turned out. So we're leading the thing together. And I would say that goes back to everything that we do. I mean, if you're the leader of an organization, you're not in that alone. It's not just you that's making that thing a success. It's a great team, right down to the janitor, right? I mean, every single person is critical on your team and doing something important. And it doesn't matter what role they're in, you need everybody clicking along in there. So when my wife got cancer, I suddenly had to revert and fill her role. And suddenly I'm helping cook the meals and I'm helping do the dishes and get the kids off to school and chase them after school and get them to their after school activities and do all the things that she wasn't doing. And for me, it helped me appreciate her more, because suddenly I could see that. I could see, man, she's working twice as hard as me. I get to go to work, and and I'm out of sight, out of mind of all this stuff, but she's there running around every day holding that all together. And so a little bit of role reversal there. And I think it's really good for every leader to consider that and to put themselves in that situation, whether it's in your family or whether it's in your work life, right? To appreciate how hard it is for some of those other jobs, and to just be sympathetic or empathetic, with them in their roles, at times. And sometimes that's part of what it takes, is just an understanding boss or an understanding partner that, can appreciate all that they're going through. And she was fighting cancer, so you've got all of the ramifications that come with that. But on the other side, she worried about all those other things. So being able to step in and relieve that worry, and let her concentrate on getting better and fighting the good fight, I think it was really good for us.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you've said it a couple of times, and some people say it. That was a great question, and I'm going to say that was a great answer. And I really appreciate you sharing all that. That was a perfect perspective, in my opinion. So appreciate that. I do have a question as you're going through that and having to start now help out with the meal prep. What was your go-to dad meal? Right, every dad's got like a time-saving, simple meal that they put together in a pinch. What's your favorite one?
So I'm going to share a short story. So I grew up on a dairy farm, and my mom and dad would go early mornings to milk cows. And we had chores. We had to get up early and do our chores. And when they got home from milking cows, it was expected that we would have our chores done and have breakfast on the table. So me and my brothers, we divide that up. So one of us every morning was making breakfast, and we rotated around that. So my go-to meals are breakfast meals. Okay, I can make breakfast. I can make pancakes and French toast and burritos. I can do it all from a breakfast standpoint.
That's good. That's good. I love it. I recently had an experience as my role as a parent in split family. So when the weeks when the kids are at my house, I have taken it upon myself. So my mom very intentionally until I was a senior in high school, made my lunch every morning. I was a spoiled kid. Now I have 3 sisters, the youngest of which is 12 years older than I am. So I was very much kind of like an only child coming up as the only boy and as the fourth and so on. So anyway, my experience was that I really appreciated that. And I wanted to pass that grandma love on to my kids. And, but recently, there was a workout that I wanted to attend with a group of men locally. That meets at 5:30 in the morning, and I can't logistically do that, get back to the house, and then get the kids out of here on time in order to be able to get them to school in Chapel Hill on time. It logistically doesn't work. So finally, after enough frustration, I said, you know what, here's what we're going to do. So on the evenings, I had them pack their own lunches. Finally started moving this to that way. So they started packing their own lunches. And in the morning, I said, hey, make sure that you got your alarm set for 6 a.m. I'm not going to be here to get you guys up. You got to manage all this on your own. Make sure you're ready, have your breakfast, be ready to go when I get back so that we can go on. And so this was I started out as a complete experiment, right? I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. But worst case scenario, a couple of days we're late for school. And I got back on the first day, Dean, and here they are. They're sitting on the couch. They were clothed. They were fed. They had gotten up on time. Their lunches are packed. Their school bags are packed. Everything's ready to go. They managed it all themselves. In fact, they were ready 15 minutes earlier than normally when I'm babysitting this process. Day 2, same thing. Day 3, same thing. Day 4, I'm like, all right, these guys are doing better without me than they did with me. Managing this process, and so it's really cool. And when you think about being intentional, sometimes means letting go of some of that stuff, right? Just like your folks had to say, hey, there's a lot of work to get done on a dairy farm We don't have time to babysit every bit of the process. So you're going to get to develop some skill sets early on in life, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's pretty critical. I mean, it helps shape who we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great. I think I look at your kids too and think, man, they probably learned a lot from that, grew from that, and there was probably less yelling in the process too, nagging at them to get ready. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think they do better without me. So which, hey, you know what? They're almost 16, almost 14 and 8. They're just at that point in life where, 3 more years, they're on their own anyway. So
very cool.
What's been your biggest win as a leader? We're going to do a little bit of a speed round here so we can get this in under time. But yeah, talk to me. What's been your biggest win as a leader?
So I would tie it back to the previous question, right? I would say family. We work and do everything that we do at work, but at the end of the day, we do it so that we can have a family and have a family life. And so it feels pretty good to be having grandkids and to have 4 married kids and to be in that spot of life right now. So I would attribute it back to that. That's been my greatest win.
I love it. Blessed with legacy. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Who's been somebody that you have admired over the course of your career?
This is a good question too. And I've thought a little bit about it. And, one of the standard answers is your dad, right? Or your mom, and I would say my answer to that question is probably about a half a dozen different people. Your dad is really good at some things, and I've learned a lot from my dad. There are other things that maybe not so shiny at, right? And I'm probably the exact same way as a dad. So I hope my kids don't hold it against me. And I look at different bosses that I've had and different co-workers and different people that I've interacted over the years. And I see a half a dozen of them that each helped shape me into who I am, each with a different strength. So I would say not any one person, but a half a dozen different ones that I could glean from their example. And I'm thankful for that. Thankful for the opportunity to have interacted with so many good people.
Yeah. We are all built upon the shoulders of people that have gone before us. We're all capable of doing the things that we get to do in our careers and in our lives because of the sacrifices and the examples and the help that we've had. I would encourage people to do this. I have a running list. I look at this on Mother's Day, and what it is a list of all the women that have supported me in becoming who I've been able to become, good, bad, or indifferent. But these are the people I know I couldn't be who I am today without this list and it is it's getting to be a very long list. There's about 30 names on it of women, from my mom to my sisters to my wife, to friends that have supported me, and church leaders that have supported me, and other people that have had a major influence on the course of my career. Like, I would not be able to be who I was without that. So that's it's a shared responsibility, isn't it? The people that we admire.
And it's fun. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of book should we be looking at or listening to? What do you like? Audible, reading books? What's your take?
Yeah, so I do a lot of Audible just because I travel a lot, right? I mean, with my job and work, and so I listen to a lot of books. But if I had to pick a book, and it's an old book, right? But if you haven't listened to Who Moved My Cheese or looked at that book, I mean, it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. And when I look at it, it still pertains today. I think that our workforce, our people, the young generation coming in, I think our cheese is constantly moving. And I think that's a good book and a good reminder book to, if you haven't read it, I'd read it. It's an old one, but it's a good one. So
I think that's a great one, especially with all the just the growth and the upstarts and so much startups in the agribusiness space right now. A lot of acquisitions, a lot of mergers. This is constantly happening. So if you're going to stay in the industry there's a really high chance at some point you're going to go through a situation where somebody's going to move your cheese.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Okay. How do you keep your energy up? What's your ways for maximizing productivity?
Get up early.
You got to
get up early. I mean, even if you have a hard time shutting down at night and have a hard time sleeping, I think it helps everything to get up early. And I find on days when I don't get up early that that I just don't get enough accomplished. And so I would say just get up early, and whether that's to spend a few minutes reading or run to the gym or go for a walk or whatever you're going to do, I just say that's pretty key for me. Get up early.
I like it. All right. Last question I want to get into with you, Dean, is, talk about vulnerability a little bit, and from a leadership perspective, how important is vulnerability in being able to create an intentional environment to work in?
Critical. I think it's critical. I think that, it keeps it real, right? I think that everybody that's out there is looking for something, right? Whether it's, success with their family, whether it's money to raise a family, or success with their job, and so, as leaders, we have to be receptive to that. And oftentimes we've been right there too. You've been in the same spot. So opening up and sharing a little bit of that, I think that culturally we've seen a shift to where, hey, you're not supposed to share anything about religion, and you're not supposed to bring up family, and you're not supposed to bring up marriages. And there's so many things that they say we can't do. And I would say, I think we need to open up and be a little bit vulnerable and share some of that, right? I think it's okay to pray about our work and pray about our families. And I think that that's all right. And I think it's okay to bring that up. And, even if they pray to somebody different than me, it's okay to open ourselves up and share some of that, some of that vulnerability of, hey, we're just real people too, and just trying to get through this thing and do the best we can. So.
Fantastic answer. And I could not agree more. Wonderful. Well, Dean, if you would, before we close this down, tell us a little bit about your what you do, where you're at, and how do we follow or get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks. I've been in the retail agricultural space my whole life. I spent a stint with Simplot. I spent a stint with a cooperative here in Idaho in the PNW. I spent a little stint with FMC. And I look back at all of those, and they all helped shape me. I'm currently with a biological company. We're basic. It's a small family-owned business, and we now sell to those same retailers that I worked with. And it's fun. It's a fun space to be in. It's developing rapidly, and it's good. It's healthy agriculture. It improves how our fertilizers are taken into the plant and how well they work and their efficacy. And so it's fun to be on that cutting edge and to be there and I like to help people. So I feel like Farm Grade has a unique product and a unique fit. So fun to be able to help people, help farmers, help retailers as they help farmers. And so that's what I do. That's where I'm at right now. So appreciate the opportunity to come on and visit with you.
Yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun and very insightful. One of my favorite things about all this is I get to learn from great minds and great guys like you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.